get into office holding, and that is show up. Secondly, show up on time. So, you open up your pamphlets, and those of you who are on the internet don't get pamphlets because you're mostly illiterate. You open up your pamphlets, you're going to see a Why Are You Here questionnaire. And the Why Are You Here questionnaire is focused on the reasons people want to get into office holding. And I have a list of them here for why you might want to get into office holding. And you can see they sort of progress through of, I don't know why I want to hold office, or I want to get in, but I'm not really sure how to do it. But fundamentally, I want you to know what my purpose here is. It used to be several years ago that we had a population at our park. We had a population of our park that was mostly young. We had people, about 30 people at the park, and I would say 24, 25 of them or so were under the age of 18. What this really meant, come in and have a seat, please. There's some chairs right there, go ahead and grab chairs. What this meant is that the people who could run for office, the adults, were very few. There were 4 or 5 of us. And the way that we got new officers was not by waiting until people got older. What actually happened is people moved from other parks who were already adults, already office holders, and they filled that gap. Now since then, our demographic has flipped. Now we have a population where we have lots of people who are over 18, very few who are under 18. We realized this a few months ago when Amy and I were looking for a feast hall, and one of our options was a hall that catered towards high school kids, 14 to 18, and we said, oh, we have lots of those. But when we counted the park, we realized we had 4, 3, one of them sitting right there. We didn't have a whole lot of them. So it occurred to us that our demographic had reversed. Do y'all have your papers? What page on? Page 1. So, despite our demographic reversal, that's going to be going on for just a little bit longer. Despite our demographic reversing, our 18 to 22 crowd did not step in and begin running for office. This is sort of new and unique in Dragonspine's history. Back when I started, we had the 18 to 22s who were the ones in charge, one of them sitting right over there. And we did have some 30-somethings in the club, but not as many running the game as we do now. There were maybe like 3, I think. So what our purpose here really is to address the people who are the 18 to 22s or so, you guys, and say, you can run for office, you should run for office, and here's how you can do it. Specifically for people who aren't really sure how to begin doing that, because that's one of the theories, is maybe people just aren't sure how to do this yet. And secondly, for people who are looking in saying, well, I don't feel like I'm one of the people who can run for office. I feel like an outsider looking in, and I want to know how to do this. Juba, if you'd like a chair, you can go ahead and grab that one. No. Okay. So, the first slide that I have here is just some blah blah about me, just let you know where I'm from. And the important thing I want you to take away from this is I'm going to be talking about some terms, I'm going to be using some terms during the course of this presentation. People talk about in-crowd and out-crowd. The terms I'm going to be using are core and casual for the different demographics we have at the park. And what I want you to know is that in the course of the time that I've been playing at Dragonspine, I have on many occasions been one of the others. I have not always been a core person at this park. I didn't start out that way, and nobody does. Which means if you're thinking at the moment, well, I just kind of play the game, I feel like an outsider in the game, or I'm just a casual player, you can transition to the place where you see the leaders. You can become a core player, you can become an in-person. And we'll revisit those terms in a little bit. And over the course of that time, I've learned a few things, and I want other people to hear about them. Hopefully I have something to say. Now, we have people from the internet that are listening in, so if you guys start saying anything or doing anything silly, it's getting broadcasted through that webcam. And a lot of the things that I'm going to be saying here are really specifically for our park. That said, I think a lot of them can translate to other parks in Amtgard. Obviously, every park has a different demographic. We're very fortunate at our park that even when we do have people who sort of feel like, oh, I can't get involved, we have very broad consensus at our park, for example. The camps, I use that term very loosely, we all get along at our park. We're all on the same side. Not a lot of the parks in Amtgard are like that. So we're sort of lucky. And a lot of what I'm saying is sort of based on that, which means people who come from a park where that's not true will have more difficulty applying this, but a lot of it still holds true. We've been through that one already. So what you might do is take a look at that first paper in your pamphlets and sort of think about where you might stand in that. What are the reasons, what are the confusions you might have about running for office? And on the next page, think about why you want to run for office. Before I go any further, I'm going to tell you a story. And before I tell you the story, I want you to know that everything I'm about to tell you did not actually happen. Okay? None of this actually happened. So, a few years ago, some people went to Clan. Okay? They went to Clan a week in advance because they heard that there were animals up in the mountains and they wanted to go hunting up in the mountains. So they brought a couple of guns with them and they went up a week in advance. They got their tent set up and they're going to go out hunting. Now, if anybody's ever been to the campsites that we have in that area, you know that the animals are going to be bears. These guys aren't particularly bright, but anyway. So they go up there and they go out into the woods and one of the guys says, you know, I'm not really feeling it. I'm just going to stay right here in the camp and you go. I don't want to go. And his friend says, okay, I'll go out there and I'll go hunting by myself. And he did. Didn't find anything, but he comes back to his camp and his buddy is like lying there, face down, on the ground, his face like in a pile of baby wipes with swords all around him, not moving. And he sort of looks at them and says, oh my God, I think he's dead. He's not doing anything, he's not moving. And he just freaks out. So he picks up his phone and he calls 911 and he's looking at the body and he says, hey, sir, you gotta help me, my buddy's just lying on the ground, I think he's dead, he's not even moving. And the person says, sir, please calm down. What's going on? Besides the dog barking. What's going on? And he says, okay, I think my buddy is dead. He says, well, we're the emergency services, we can send someone out to help you. I just need to know exactly what's going on. So first things first, can you make sure he's dead? And he says, okay, 1 second. And the guy on the other end is quiet, and then bang! He comes back to the phone and says, okay, now what? Now, this joke, by the way, was voted by people in Britain as the funniest joke in the world. I'm not sure if that's completely true, but you'll find that when people do presentations like this, they will often open with a joke, and there's a reason they do that. And the reason they do that, I'm going to come back to as we get through the course of this presentation. So, why do you want to be in office? This is something that you want to think about, because the reasons you run for office, or the perceived reasons you run for office, will make a difference in whether or not you get there. And you can see that I have a bunch of reasons here, and you can kind of look down the list. For those of you who are listening from computer land, it begins with I don't know why I want to run for office, which is a bad reason, and works its way down to I have the trust of the populace, a great idea, and the ability to implement it. So you can see we have a scale here that moves down in reasons. And you can kind of look at this and think about, well, how do I get from the very top and start working my way down to reasons that are going to get me elected because people are going to trust me to do a good job. The one reason that I want to point out here from this list, I'm not going to read them all, but the second one says, I want to give back to the club. When I hear that, I hear, I don't know, because if someone wants to give back to the club, well then you ask them, well, what do you mean by that? And their answer is, well, you know, the club's been good to me for a long time, I want to give back to it. Well, what does that mean? It doesn't really mean anything. What it means is, I don't know I'm running for office, I just feel vaguely like I oughta. We want to get past that and move down the list. Incidentally, if you have any questions while we're moving along, there will be breaks throughout. And go ahead and write your questions down on your papers. You can ask them during the breaks. And at the very end, I'll also have some time where I can answer some questions. So, getting elected and doing well. We're going to cover some concepts here. One of the most important concepts we're going to cover is positional power versus personal power. We're going to talk about what those two terms mean and how you get them both. Because really, in order to be a good officer, you need them both. Winning over the in crowd, and I have that term in quotes. In this case, I have the term in quotes because it's not a term that I like. I don't think we should talk about in crowd and out crowd because that's a divisive dynamic, and the terms that I'm going to replace them with will be coming up. Winning over the out crowd, etc. Thank you. So we're going to go over these concepts of how you get elected and do well. What is positional power? What does that mean? Well, you can tell it's about positions, which means, well, you're the king. And since you're the king, you have power, right? Not so much. You really don't. The question of who has it in Amtgard is nobody has it in Amtgard. Positional power in a volunteer organization doesn't exist. Which means if you get elected king and you're hoping to rely on that, and that's all you have, then your authority is zero. You basically don't have anything. And that applies for basically every office. If you're hoping that getting elected to a position will give you power in the game, you're in for a big disappointment. So, is there power you can get from your position in a volunteer organization? The answer is going to be no. Because what can you do with it? Well, you can do some things with positional power. You can set the agenda, you can give us some awards, you can spend club money. But you see the last thing on this list? Only if you have support. If the whole park is against you or nobody cares about what you're doing, you're going to have a very limited ability to get anything done. So, the important takeaway from this portion, and this is the quick portion before we get to the good part, is you can't actually really have positional power in Amtgard unless you have something else. Here's, again, the problems of positional power. And you can sort of see a script here where, it's a volunteer organization. I just got elected. Nobody listens to me. What am I doing wrong? Well, you don't have something else. And the thing that you don't have is... A very lovely pretty picture. Actually, I think we just started a couple minutes late because that's our first break slide. But I wanted to just, before we get to the next part, the thing you need to know here is that the failure of positional power, if you are trying to do things with your position in Amtgard, like you're the regent or the champion or a guild master, and you can't get it done, is because you haven't got enough of something called personal power. And I'll be explaining that after that next slide comes up, because that next pretty slide is the break slide. People who don't have personal power will have difficulty or find it impossible to get people to acknowledge their positional power. And that takes us to the very lovely pretty slide, which is our first break. We're going to take about 2 or 3 minutes and then get to the meat and potatoes of the presentation.